got a couple of different types of cabinet scrapers here. You can see this is just an old record one, and I've got two older Stanleys. Veritas makes one. I don't happen to have one of those, or I'd show you. What I've got here are just some old ones that we picked up around, you know, eBay, old tool dealers, flea markets, that kind of stuff. Two different types of attachments on these. I've got one with thumb screws, and I've got the one Stanley and the record both have slotted retaining screws. What you want to look for in a cabinet scraper is you want to make sure that you don't have any cracks in the casting as you move around it. You want to make sure your bed is relatively flat, and we can check that with just the edge of a square. We want to make sure that corner to corner and across the face and across the length of this thing that it's relatively flat. Again, this thing is going to turn around, and by the time we advance that thumb screw and bend that blade, it's going to leave behind a slightly curved surface on our board. So don't spend 3 days flattening the sole of this thing until you're within 1 or 2 thousandths of an inch of being perfectly flat. Relatively flat. You just don't want to see big gaps in there when you check it from corner to corner, across the width and across the length. Okay? Whatever retaining mechanism you like is fine. You know, the first step in getting this thing ready to go, like I said, is getting it relatively flat. Then the next step is we're going to loosen up the thumb screws on this one, and I'm going to show you how to sharpen up the blade and burnish it, and then we're going to give it a test out on our piece of tiger maple from our card scraper. So why don't we get to it? All right. I've taken that 45-degree block that we made and clamped my scraper against it into the vise. You can see I'm pulling away a little bit, not a big deal. We want to try and get this thing filed over at about a 45-degree angle. So I'm just going to keep going across here, and again, just like the card scraper, we're trying to get rid of any remnants of an old burnish on there, that hook. Excellent. I've also pulled my bevel down till I'm nice and even all the way across. I've got one tiny little low spot right there. There it goes, perfect. And I'm relatively straight across. And that hook on there is fairly flexible. So the next step is we're going to throw the stones in the vise and get started honing just like we did on the card scraper. Now I've got that same 1200 grit stone in my vise that I used on the card scraper, and got a little water on my vise. And I'm going to use that same 45-degree block, and we're going to use that as a honing guide. It's pretty much the only thing I use a honing guide for. I'm going to take that bevel edge. First thing I'm going to do is do the flat surface, because that's where my burr is. Remember, I was filing on that bevel, so I pushed all the fibers over onto that flat side. So we're just going to hone off the flat side of the bevel. The flat side of the scraper. My burr is gone on that side. So I'm going to now take it and hold it up against this block. The great thing about this is, as you move back and forth, if you start to wear down this block and it gets out of 45 or out of flat, go make another block. And we're just going to hold it tight, push it down right against the stone. And what we're trying to do now is just hone out all of those file marks that we had in there and end up with no burr. Actually, that worked pretty quickly. So I think I'm going to move right on to the 4000 stone. That was good. Some days you eat the bear. Lock in my 4000 stone. Hone that back side. Get it nice and, there we go, perfect. Wipe down my block a little. Oh yeah. I'm even to the point where I can pretty much shave with that, and that's, I mean, you saw no time at all it took to do that. So the next step is we got to get rid of the block and the stone. Clean up my bench. My hands are getting pretty messy. You'll have to forgive me. It's real woodworking. Clamp your burnisher right into your, clamp your scraper blade right into your vise. Take your burnisher, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to work right on that pointed edge of the triangular, or right on the edge of a round burnisher. And now I'm going to pull over at a much steeper angle. I'm about 30 degrees or so, and with a fair amount of downward pressure, I'm going to just burnish that hook right over. And I mean, you're going to get to the point where it's pretty visible. And I'm going to keep, as I go across, I'm going to keep working up closer to 90 degrees, but I'm not going to go all the way there. I'm going to stick around that 15 or 20 degree mark until I have a good sized hook pushed over there. Now with that metal coming up on the 45 degree angle, it's actually pretty easy to get a decent sized hook. And I don't know if we can get this on the camera or not, but if we sort of look, yeah, you can see it right there. You can actually visibly see the size of that hook coming right off of there. It's absolutely perfect. I'm going to take the point of my burnisher, open that hook up a little bit, and now it's time to head down to the other end of the bench, and I'm going to show you how to set this up into the cabinet scraper and get that thing just tuned up perfectly so that it's pulling off nice wide perfect shavings every time. So I've got that freshly sharpened scraper blade there. You can see I've got the body of my scraper, and I'm going to put it in from the bottom so that I don't knock that burr off. Set it up in there, and I've got that retaining bar pretty loose in there. I mean, it's just rattling around, you know, you can hear it. And what we're going to do is, and again, there's a lot of different kinds of scrapers, so yours may be a little different than this one, but the Stanley has that retaining bar and the scraper blade. We want to set that down onto our board and give the scraper blade a good bit of downward pressure. Tighten up. Well, this one has thumb screws. Yours may have slotted screws or some kind of a hex head bolt or something on there. That's fine. You want to make sure that that thumb screw, as we're doing this, is really loose. Okay? So loosen up just a little bit. Make sure that we're in contact there with the surface of the board. And what I'm looking for is to get to the point where, with that thumb screw completely backed off, I'm hearing the scraper blade just touch the surface of the board as I push it across. There we go. And you can see actually that I'm pulling a shaving off of this side, which means my left side, or your right side, depending on, you know, how we talk about this, is not down as far. That's better. I'm pulling more out of the middle. So I'm just going to take my burnisher, give those thumb screws a good tighten up. And now I'm going to take that thumb screw around until I just make contact, and I'm going to give it about a 1/4 to 3/8 of a turn. And oh, we're almost there. Now I'm moving at about a 1/16 of a turn at a time, and you can see I'm starting to pull off plain style shavings. And if I spend a little bit more time adjusting this to get the corners down a little bit even further, I can actually get a shaving that's about 1.5 inches to 2 inches wide off of it. So if we go back to this board that we were using on our card scraper, there's still just a tiny little bit of tear out over here where we were concentrating with the card scraper. But the great thing about this is, as opposed to the card scraper, I can get rid of that tear out in 2 or 3 strokes as opposed to just constantly going over it with the card scraper. Again, you're gripping the handles, thumbs on the back, lots of downward pressure, and we're just trying to get a good, even, wide curl. I mean, those are pretty good. I mean, they're about 1 inch, a little over 1 inch wide here, 1.25 inches. That's about as good as you can possibly get. And the great thing about this is, once you get that thing tuned up, it leaves a glass smooth finish behind.